That morning, there was something unusual outside the courthouse. People were gathering, and everyone seemed to be looking in the same direction. A man was standing there, wearing a suit, confident and smiling. His lawyer was with him. The two were talking calmly, as if there was nothing to be worried about. The man's name was Daniel Carter. A short distance away, a woman stood alone, simple clothes, a file in her hand. She had no one with her. Her name was Emily Carter. People noticed the contrast immediately. "It looks like she doesn't even have a lawyer," someone said. "This case is over before it's even started," another replied. Emily Carter remained silent. She didn't look at anyone, and she didn't respond. The courtroom doors opened, and everyone went inside. Daniel Carter and his lawyer took seats in the front row. Daniel looked completely relaxed. He straightened his jacket and leaned back in his chair, as if this day posed no challenge at all. Emily Carter sat on a bench toward the back. The same file rested in her hands. She didn't look around. She stared straight ahead. Judge Williams entered the courtroom. Everyone stood, then sat back down. The case was called. When the names Daniel and Emily Carter were read out, a few people turned around again to look at Emily. Daniel's lawyer began to speak. His voice was confident. Every point was clear, every argument prepared. Dates, facts, legal language. Everything flowed so smoothly that it felt like the story had only one side. Daniel nodded occasionally. Sometimes he looked at the judge, sometimes at his lawyer. The same confident smile remained on his face, the one he had been wearing since the morning. Emily Carter stayed silent the entire time. When Judge Williams saw that the lawyer had finished, he closed the file and looked up at Emily. "Mrs. Carter," the judge said, "would you like to present your case yourself?" For a moment, the courtroom fell completely silent. Daniel Carter didn't even try to hide his smile. To him, this question felt just as pointless as the case itself. He leaned back a little further in his chair, thinking this formality would soon be over. But when Emily Carter stood up from her seat and slowly walked forward, a few people sat up straighter. Her steps were calm, but they did not hesitate. She stopped in front of the judge and opened her file. The courtroom went completely quiet. Up to that moment, Daniel Carter was completely at ease. He had no idea that whatever was about to happen next would leave him utterly shaken. Emily Carter stood in front of the judge with the file open in her hands. For a few seconds, she didn't say anything. The silence wasn't awkward. It was deliberate. Daniel Carter watched her closely now. His smile had faded slightly, not because he was worried, but because the pause felt unnecessary. In his mind, this was supposed to be quick. Judge Williams waited patiently. When Emily finally spoke, her voice was calm. Not loud, not emotional. "Your Honor," she said, "I'll be brief." That caught a few people off guard. Daniel's lawyer glanced at her, then at Daniel, as if to say, "This won't take long." Emily continued, "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to explain." She placed the file on the podium and opened the first page. Daniel shifted slightly in his seat. Emily looked down at the paper, then back up at the judge. "For the past 7 years," she said, "I've handled every financial record in our household." Daniel frowned almost imperceptibly. Emily went on, "I paid the bills, I managed the accounts, I filed the documents. Not because I was asked to, but because I was told it wasn't something he wanted to deal with." She paused. No one ever questioned that. Daniel leaned forward just a little. Emily turned a page. "These are bank statements," she said, holding up a copy. "They show transfers made from our joint account over the last 3 years. She handed the documents to the clerk, who passed them to Judge Williams. Daniel's lawyer raised his hand slightly. "Your Honor," he said, "we haven't reviewed." Judge Williams lifted his hand calmly. "I'll allow her to continue." Emily nodded once and kept going. "These transfers weren't discussed, they weren't explained, and they weren't small." Daniel crossed his arms. Emily looked straight ahead. "I didn't notice at first," she said, "because I trusted him." That word, trusted, landed quietly in the room. Daniel looked away for a moment. Emily turned another page. "These payments were sent to an account I didn't recognize. When I asked about it, I was told it was business. Nothing more." She paused again, and for a while I accepted that. Daniel's lawyer shifted in his chair. Emily took a breath. But last year, she said, I started checking more closely. She looked at the judge. What I found didn't match what I was told. Judge Williams adjusted his glasses and looked down at the documents again. Daniel now sat upright. Emily continued, her tone unchanged. The account receiving those funds is registered under a separate company, a company my husband never disclosed. There was a subtle change in the room, not shock, attention. Daniel's jaw tightened. Emily added, that company was created using our shared address, but my name was never listed. Daniel's lawyer leaned toward him and whispered something. Daniel shook his head slightly, still confident but more alert now. Emily turned one final page. I brought these documents today, she said, because I wanted the court to see what I saw. She closed the file gently. I'm not asking for sympathy, she said. I'm asking for clarity. Judge Williams remained silent for a moment. Then he looked up. Mr. Carter, he said, were you aware of these accounts being managed this way? Daniel hesitated, just for a second. Then he smiled again. Yes, Your Honor, he said. They're legitimate business transactions. Judge Williams nodded slowly. Very well, he said. We'll examine them. Emily returned to her seat. Daniel watched her walk back, his expression controlled. But something had shifted. Not in the verdict, not yet. In the certainty. Daniel still believed this would end in his favor. He just wasn't as comfortable believing it anymore. Judge Williams reviewed the documents quietly. He didn't rush. He didn't comment. That silence lasted longer than Daniel Carter expected. Daniel shifted in his seat. He glanced at his lawyer, who was now reading the same pages with a more serious expression than before. Judge Williams finally looked up. Mrs. Carter, he said, how did you obtain these records? Emily stood again. They're official statements, Your Honor, she replied, requested directly from the bank. I'm listed on the joint account, so I had legal access. Judge Williams nodded. Mr. Carter, he said, turning to Daniel, when was this company formed? Daniel cleared his throat. 3 years ago, he answered. And your wife wasn't informed? The judge asked. Daniel paused. It wasn't relevant, he said. It was a business decision. Judge Williams looked down at the file again. These transfers total a significant amount, he said. More than what's reflected in your disclosed income. Daniel's lawyer spoke quickly. Your Honor, business revenue doesn't always appear as personal income. I understand that, Judge Williams said calmly. That's not my question. He turned back to Daniel. Where did these funds go after reaching the company account? Daniel hesitated, only briefly, but this time it was noticeable. They were reinvested, he said. In what? The judge asked. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it again. His lawyer leaned forward. Your Honor, we can provide documentation at a later. Judge Williams raised his hand once more. Mr. Carter, he said, this is your opportunity to clarify. Daniel's jaw tightened. Emily watched quietly from her seat. Daniel finally spoke. Various ventures, he said. Consulting, assets. Judge Williams wrote something down. I see, he said. He turned a page. These records also show regular payments from that same account. The judge continued. To a personal residence that is not listed as your marital home. The room felt different now. Daniel straightened in his chair. That property isn't relevant, he said. Judge Williams looked up. Is it owned by you? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Yes, he said finally. And does your wife know about it? The judge asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. No, he said. Emily's expression didn't change. Judge Williams leaned back slightly. So to be clear, he said, marital funds were transferred to a company your wife didn't know about, and those funds were used to support a property she was never informed of. Daniel's lawyer adjusted his tie. Your Honor, he said, this is becoming speculative. Judge Williams looked at him calmly. No, he said, it's becoming specific. Daniel swallowed. Emily stood once more. Your Honor, she said. May I add something? Judge Williams nodded. Emily walked forward again, her movements steady. I didn't bring these records to punish anyone, she said. I brought them because I wanted the truth on the table. She paused. The truth is, I wasn't just kept in the dark, she continued. I was intentionally excluded. Judge Williams looked at Daniel. Mr. Carter, he said. "We will need full disclosure of all related accounts, properties, and entities." Daniel nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Williams closed the file. "We'll take a short recess," he said. "When we return, we'll address these matters in detail." The gavel struck lightly. Court adjourned. Daniel stood slowly. For the first time that day, he didn't smile. He didn't look at Emily either. He just stared straight ahead, realizing that whatever control he thought he had was slipping. The courtroom reconvened after the recess. When Judge Williams returned, the room felt heavier than before. The quiet conversation stopped immediately. Everyone sensed that the direction of the case had changed, even if no one said it out loud. Daniel Carter sat straighter now. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering quickly, but Daniel barely responded. His confidence hadn't disappeared completely, but it was no longer effortless. Emily Carter took her seat without expression. She didn't look at Daniel. She didn't look at the audience. She simply waited. Judge Williams reviewed the expanded set of documents that had been submitted during the recess. Additional bank records, property filings, corporate registrations. Everything was neatly organized. "Mr. Carter," the judge said at last, "thank you for providing the additional disclosures." Daniel nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." Judge Williams adjusted his glasses. "These records confirm the existence of multiple accounts and assets that were not disclosed during the initial filings of this case." Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, "there was no intention to conceal. These matters were administrative." Judge Williams raised his hand gently. "Intent is something the court will consider," he said, "but disclosure is not optional." He turned another page. "Mrs. Carter," the judge continued, "you testified that you managed the household, finances, but were unaware of these accounts and properties." "That's correct," Emily said calmly. Judge Williams nodded. "The evidence supports that statement. There was no reacti." On from Emily. No relief, no satisfaction. Daniel shifted in his seat. Judge Williams leaned forward slightly. "This court does not look favorably upon incomplete financial transparency in marital proceedings," he said, "especially when one party has significantly greater access to information than the other." Daniel's lawyer spoke again, more cautiously this time. "Your Honor, we would request time to negotiate a settlement." "That may be appropriate," Judge Williams said, "but first, the court needs clarity." He looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter, can you explain why these assets were excluded from your disclosures?" Daniel hesitated. Not briefly this time. He glanced at his lawyer, then back at the judge. "I didn't believe they were relevant," he said. Judge Williams remained silent for a moment. "Relevance," he said slowly, "is not determined by convenience." A few people in the gallery shifted in their seats. Judge Williams continued, "These omissions materially affect the division of marital assets. As such, the court will proceed accordingly." Daniel swallowed. Emily folded her hands calmly in her lap. Judge Williams addressed both parties. "Based on the evidence presented, the court finds that Mrs. Carter acted in good faith and provided full cooperation. The same cannot be said at this time for Mr. Carter." Daniel's lawyer started to speak, then stopped. Judge Williams raised his gavel slightly, not striking it, just enough to signal control. "The court orders a revised asset disclosure, audited independently," he said. "All previously undisclosed assets will be considered part of the marital estate." Daniel's face tightened. "Emil." Why remained still. "In addition," the judge continued, "temporary orders will be issued to protect Mrs. Carter's financial interests pending final resolution." He listed them clearly. Restrictions on asset transfers, access to shared accounts, temporary financial support. Each point was methodical, measured, unavoidable. Daniel nodded stiffly at each one. Emily said nothing. When the judge finished, he leaned back slightly. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "do you have anything further to add?" Emily stood. "No, Your Honor," she replied. "I believe the documents speak for themselves." Judge Williams nodded once. "They do." He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carter?" Daniel stood as well. "No, Your Honor." The judge closed the file. "This court values honesty," he said, "and today honesty made the difference." The gavel struck. Court adjourned. People began to stand. Conversations started again, quieter than before. Not whispers this time, reflections. Daniel remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. His lawyer spoke to him, but Daniel didn't respond immediately. Emily gathered her file. As she walked past Daniel, neither of them looked at each other. Outside the courtroom, the hallway felt brighter than before. Emily paused briefly near the exit. She didn't smile. She didn't look back. She simply took a breath, the kind that comes not from victory, but from release. Inside the courtroom, Daniel Carter finally stood. For the first time that day, he looked unsure of what came next, not because the judge had spoken, but because the truth had. If you stayed with this story until the end, leave a comment below and share what you think Daniel's biggest mistake was, and whether Emily chose the right moment to finally speak. I read and reply to every comment.